You mean you two were married? She said, I can't believe it. I've been in class with you all this time. I had no idea. You don't have that angst previously married couples have, which I took as a big compliment.
Hey, it's Carla Rieger from the Artistry of Change and Mind Story Academy, and we'd like to present the Successful Life podcast. Discover mindset secrets for success in business and life. Hey everyone, this is Carla Rieger, and I'm here today with Mary Sue Rabe, the founder of Women Healing the World, which is a group of women who are actively transforming and healing global society through networking. And today, Mary's going to share with us about one of the most important topics I think we all need to know more about and have solutions for, and that is to forgive ourselves and others so that we can learn, grow, and move on and help make the world a better place when we do it. So to that end, she's going to introduce us to how to use the Oh Pono Pono prayer to free yourself from the past. And many people are feeling stuck about how to feel happier, more on purpose, more fulfilled in life. And often it's because of stuck negative emotions from their past that they may not even be aware of. So this prayer helps you break free so that you find that sense of freedom and inner peace again. So Mary, let's start with how you found out about the prayer.
Well, thanks, Carla, for having me. The Oh Pono Pono prayer. Back in 1985, I had separated from my husband. We had tried everything to save our marriage, which was basically based on alcohol and partying. I had gotten pregnant and had our first daughter. And when that happened, I quit drinking so much. So it wasn't much fun anymore. And our marriage was in trouble, so we had a geographic cure, a move from Houston to Conroe, Texas, just up the road. My husband got a new job. We bought a great big house with some acres. We remodeled the house, and I got pregnant again, and I was still miserable, and I was making him miserable by nagging him all the time about his drinking. Finally, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had tried all kinds of things to get her to stop drinking, and nothing had worked. So I decided that I needed to take care of myself, and that possibly if I moved, maybe that would make him come to his senses, and maybe that would be the impetus to get him to quit drinking. So when we moved, we had not been able to sell our house in Houston. So when my youngest daughter was 6 weeks old, after having a C-section, and I could finally pick up a box, I moved my two daughters and myself back to our house in Houston. I was still very upset with him, and even more upset that the move didn't help him come to his senses. He continued to drink. I found help at the Houston Area Council of Alcoholism, and they suggested that I have an intervention. The first step of an intervention is to find out if his boss will cooperate. I made an appointment with his boss to meet me at a different bank location, and I needed to ask him if Keith would still have a job when he returned from treatment, and if his insurance might cover it. And I was also very angry because it's like his boss had all the power. His boss was the one who was in control. And it was pointed out to me that, yes, the employer is the one who has control because they're the ones that give the funds that supply the substance. So if you don't have a job and you don't have any money, then you can't buy your addiction. So anyway, I went and visited with his boss, who basically took over from there and insisted that he go to treatment. I never had to do the second part of gathering people together to confront him. So I made him the identified patient. He went to a treatment center, and I went to Family Week. And after going to Family Week and learning more about addiction and about dysfunctional families, I decided that I needed to go to 12-step meetings. So I started going to 12-step meetings, and I met this really nice lady. And I was bemoaning the fact that, I was teaching nursery school and I didn't have much money. And she said, oh, you have a prosperity issue. I know a lady who's teaching a class on prosperity. She went to Unity Ministerial School, and now she teaches and she counsels. Her name is Pat. So besides going to 12-step meetings, I signed up for Pat's classes, which were 180 degrees from the way I had been raised to think. This was all kind of New Thought Unity teachings, which was new to me, but it felt very at home. It was like, wow, I can't believe this is what I've been searching for. So I couldn't afford to go to a counselor, but Pat would see people on a donation basis. So I went to Pat for counseling. And one time I went to see Pat, I ranted and raved about my ex and how upset I was and how he wouldn't cooperate and he wouldn't work on the marriage. And she pulled out this piece of paper that had this prayer on it. It's the Oh Pono Pono prayer. And she said, I want you to read this. And so I read through it, and it was a prayer about forgiveness. And I just really went off, and I said, I am not going to forgive him. He does not deserve to be forgiven. He's a jerk, and he's the reason for all of our problems. If he'd just straighten up. Well, she just looked at me and said, I want you to read this prayer every time you start feeling the way you're feeling right now. And I want you to read it until the feeling goes away. Again, I said, no, I don't want to forgive him. And she said, well, he doesn't know that you're angry. He doesn't care that you're angry. And if you don't forgive him, who's it hurting? You're the one still holding the rope. He doesn't have a clue about how you feel. So you may as well give it up. It's going to make you ill if you don't. I felt like I hadn't gotten my $5 worth of donation. I was still angry when I left.
So what happened? Did you do the prayer?
Well, I took the prayer and I went home. So every time I felt anxious, angry, I got out the prayer and I started reading it. And I followed her instructions and I read it over and over again until I calmed down. And it was amazing to me. You know, it wasn't something, it was like a big aha or a big, oh, I'm not mad at him anymore. It was just a gradual letting go, or something within me changed. I don't know what, I don't know how. It was just magical. And then incidents would happen. He might say something or do something, and I didn't react. It's kind of like I would observe myself and go, well, that's different.
Yeah, and I've heard that if you could hook up someone's brain and watch what was happening, that when you do the prayer and you start and you're triggered when you start it, and the energy is mostly on in the survival brain, the interior reptilian brain, but as you do it, it starts to open up more of your brain, and then you have more of yourself online to deal with situations. That's sort of the neuroscience background.
Oh. Wow, that's interesting. To me, it was, you know, I was going to therapy, but it was like everything just melted away. It's like I didn't have to go to therapy. I didn't need to talk about things. It just shifted. And the interesting part is it shifted so much that Keith, my soon-to-be ex, started going to Pat also for counseling and attending her classes, the same classes that I went to.
So you and him didn't patch it up. You decided to get a divorce.
We got a divorce.
Okay.
But it was very amicable. We sat down with mediators and came to an agreement. Just the whole thing was really magical. And he started coming to these classes, and there were only maybe 10 people in the class. And he even brought his fiance. He got into a new relationship.
And how was
it didn't punch my buttons. And that's what was amazing to me. It's like the observer observing me, it's like, that doesn't make you mad? No, it didn't. One night we were discussing him picking up the girls for the weekend. And one of our classmates overheard us talking, and she looked at us real quizzically. And I could see that she was confused. And so I looked at her and I said, "Yes, we have mutual children." And she said, "You mean you two were married?" And I said, "Yes, we were." She said, "I can't believe it. I've been in class with you all this time. I had no idea. You don't have that angst previously married couples have," which I took as a big compliment. He was a great dad. We spent our holidays together. When my girls were in college, we both went to Parents' Weekend. A lot of my daughters, not close friends, but people that they knew, had no idea that their parents were divorced because we were always there sitting at the table together, attending events together, whereas other divorced parents were dividing their time, not coming at the same time.
Yeah, or making their kids choose sides, which is something my parents did.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that we wanted to make sure we didn't do. And I will say, it was very confusing, like for our families and our friends, because they wanted to choose sides. And we asked them not to. I mean, we both said our marriage fell apart because of both of us. No one is to blame.
That's huge. More people should do that, because when you think about the ramifications for children and friends and family, if you do take on that animosity like that.
Yeah, it's such negative energy.
Yeah.
And it makes it unpleasant for everybody. Everybody kind of tiptoes around. One of my nieces, her in-laws were getting a divorce. And so she came to me and asked me, "How do you all have such a nice relationship?" And I said, "Forgiveness." So she asked me to talk to her mother-in-law, which I did. But, she was in the same place that I was. She didn't want to forgive, but she didn't want the prayer and wouldn't take it from me. So.
But obviously your ex-husband did. Keith got, if he was in Matt's class.
Yes, he read the prayer also. And so I think, it worked miracles for him too.
But he was obviously inspired by you taking the first step of letting go.
Yes.
So that's just something for people who are listening, that even if the other person's still not acting how you want, you changing your perspective on them sometimes does, as in your case, inspire them to do the same, right?
Yes. It's a program of attraction. That's what he saw. He saw that I had a lot of peace, and he wanted that peace.
Right. That's
so
amazing.
Yeah, it really was. And it's so simple.
And you'd also told me that, you ended up having holidays together, and then that he's now passed away, but your story of that's amazing.
Well, when my daughters realized that he needed to be in hospice care, I had rented an apartment in the same complex where they have a townhouse that they were living in. And so we talked about different possibilities. And one of them asked, "Well, would it be possible for us to take him to your house? There's not as much furniture. We can come down there. We can go to our house and sleep if we want," just all the reasons for it. So I said, "Oh, sure." And then I walked out in the hall and thought, "Oh no, what have I just committed myself to?" But it was really interesting. We got into a routine. I'd get up in the morning and make coffee for him. And what was really interesting was his friends came over. And there were several times when his friends would come over and I would leave the room. I would go upstairs. And I overheard several of them talking at different times. And these two gals in particular, I remember hearing them and they were going, "Now, isn't this his ex-wife's house? Maybe I should be nicer to my ex. I mean, that's really something that his ex-wife is letting him come be here."
That's amazing. And how was it for you and him at the end? And I ask just because I remember when my mother was dying, And my parents had not spoken for 18 years, even about us as kids. It always had to be a go-between person. And when my mom was dying, my dad came to the hospital. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is he going to say? They've had all these years of unresolved stuff. But he came and he just sat with her and he held her hand. And she couldn't hardly have even talk at that point. She was dying of cancer. And he held her hand and they just sat there together and reconnected to the love that they once had.
Mm.
And my father walked out of there a much lighter person. Do you know what I mean? Like I saw this look on his face, and I feel that my mother passed away a lighter, better person just for that 15 minutes of being together. So I was just curious how it was for you and Keith near the end.
It was, well, like I said, I would get up in the morning and make coffee for him, and we would chat. And I was trying, I wanted to be supportive, and I wanted to do what was necessary, and I wanted to support my daughters, but I didn't want to interfere in their relationship with him.
Right.
So I usually spent the time with him in the morning before they got there. And I don't know, it was just real pleasant, real peaceful.
You and him had already done the work years before, and so you were just in that place of friendly support.
Yeah. And, looking out for the common good of our daughters.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So
even though it seems like such a little thing, just the ramifications that are so huge. So just let's find out a little bit of background about it. I know it comes from Hawaiian ancient culture. So what's your understanding of the background of it?
Well, I know that Pat was at a healing retreat in Mexico. And this woman came up to her and said, I need to give you this prayer. And I wonder if it was this lady named Morna. I think she died maybe in 1972. Anyway, she was Hawaiian, and she did a lot of work with this particular prayer. She was a kahuna.
I'd heard that originally the prayer was used as part of the tribe to help sure there wasn't as much conflict, but then it can also be used individually, right?
Right. So yes, it can be used individually. And I do think that it was used as a ceremony for the whole community. And then it has been used by there's been a number of people who have written books about it, Joe Vitale being one. And he and a fellow by the name of Hugh Lynn took it, and they basically made it into 4 sentences. But I really like the original myself. I was introduced to it so long ago, and it did such wonders for me that I feel like it's more substantial than the 4-sentence version.
And so, of course, at this point, people are wondering, how do I get a copy of that prayer?
Right. I'm glad to share the one that I used. And Pat took the prayer and she created different ones, which, if people want, I'd be willing to share them also. But the basic one, would you like me to read it?
Yeah, read it. And maybe what we can do also is we'll lead listeners through it. Think of somebody that you feel still some negativity towards. I'm sure everybody's got somebody. It could be someone from years ago, a step parent, or it could be, an ex, or it could be someone present in your life that's just annoying you a bit. It could be a teenager, whatever, or a work colleague. So just go along with this, and so you can imagine yourself doing it and see how it feels for you.
Okay. When I was taking Pat's classes, a lot of times we would do a forgiveness prayer, the class. This particular prayer, since it was a community thing, this one is for you to do with another person. However, I didn't want to do it with Keith, and he would not have participated at first. But you just imagine the other person there. So you read both people's parts and imagine that you're talking to the person that you want to forgive.
Okay.
And you imagine them responding to you. So I'll try and explain that as I go along.
Okay.
So it starts out, Divine Creator, Father, Mother, God, be my witness. If I, Mary, have ever offended you, Keith, in thought, word, or action, from the beginning of creation to this very moment, I humbly ask your forgiveness. Forgive all errors, resentments, guilt, offenses, blocks, and attachments I may have created or attracted into my life. Will you forgive me? And so then I imagined that his response would be, yes, I forgive you. I take your hand as a sign of release from all spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, material, financial, and karmic bondage. I affirm that as of this moment, there is no holding on to the past. I pull out of my memory banks, release, sever, and remove any trace of resistance. I release all disappointments, anger, hurt, or recrimination. From this moment, all unwanted negative memories and blocks, conscious and subconscious, that tie, bind, and attach to us together, is forever cut. Cleanse, purify, and transmute all of these unwanted energies into the pure light of Christ love. Use this light to heal energies occupied with divine light. Let divine order, love, peace, balance, wisdom, and understanding manifest in all our affairs through the divine power of the Creator, and so it is forever. Well, it covers all the bases.
It does. And, it doesn't matter your religious background. There's good sort of wording in there and you can kind of make it your own. It's just really about giving it back to a higher power in some way,
Mm-hmm.
getting out of your own small-mindedness, isn't it?
Yeah. I will say, at first when I read it, these were concepts and thoughts that I wasn't necessarily familiar with. So, I kind of questioned it, or I felt kind of uncomfortable saying some of the things. But that was 1985. I've come a long way.
Yeah. And you have to give it a try to see how it works for you. And the thing I was thinking of when you were doing it is it'd be really interesting to do it by yourself and imagine you're the other person, because I often find, you probably find this too, that the people you have the most issues with, you've sort of projected a part of yourself onto them you don't like.
Exactly.
In a way, you end up talking to yourself.
Exactly.
Of yourself you don't like. And so that's very powerful. I can see it being powerful to do it with somebody. And I did something like that with a partner that I was breaking up with. We actually did something similar to that. Super powerful. We're still friends to this day because of it. But to do it just on your own is just as powerful, isn't it?
It was for me. It is for me when I pick it up and do it when I'm feeling angst towards someone or a situation. And it's amazing how, it changes. I use it for situations also, not just people.
I just love that you said that. So what would be an example of a situation, say, that you've applied it to, just to get people thinking about that?
Well, when someone you feel like goes behind your back and does something that you don't approve of, or they say something about you or to you that you feel like you've been attacked or something.
Yeah. Or I could imagine you had like a flood in your house, or really hot outside, or the technical equipment doesn't work when you're trying to do an interview, right? You could do it for those kind of,
right.
It's not involved, but it's a situation.
Situations. Yeah.
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 And the other thing that I know you do it with, which I think is really important, is forgiveness towards yourself.
Yes. And like when you were talking about projecting, it's like you are forgiving yourself.
Right.
And that's part of it. And it's in here subtly
Right.
that you're forgiving yourself, because you're doing your part to cut all the ties and everything that's causing the problem, not just the other person.
Hugely important. And we all have our areas of judgment about ourselves that, the way we like to nag at ourselves or condemn ourselves. And I remember doing that prayer for given a presentation, a bunch of things didn't go well, some of which you could say was my fault and some were out of my control. But I was noticing myself beating myself up about it and saying, oh, how could I have done it that way? And then I did the prayer with myself and I let it go and it stopped triggering me, which was so important because I had another presentation to give and I didn't want to be bringing that self-judgment into the presentation because obviously I wouldn't do as good a job. So that's huge as well.
Yeah, it really is, because it somehow or another, just saying the prayer, gets you off that hamster wheel of negativity. And I don't know whether it's just changing your focus, but it certainly magically melted all my animosities away.
And as the founder of Women Healing the World, I know you've said it's important that people find inner peace before or as they're trying to create peace out in the world. And I know that's one of the main focuses of what you do.
Right. Yes, peace begins with me.
Yeah.
And I find that this prayer is very helpful as far as achieving peace.
Yeah, because I know you're interested in gender issues and racial issues and values issues, community breakdown.
Single moms, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Financial poverty, people being able to make it in the world without struggling. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of conflict in the world comes out of those places, doesn't it? Of seeing another they don't like, or feeling financially constricted, or feeling like you have too many obligations. And so you're really out there with a group of committed women trying to help all those situations.
Yeah. And I will say, I used this on my finances also when I was a struggling single mom. And it was amazing because I think the more worry you put into something, the more you're driving the possibility of prosperity away from you instead of toward you.
Right.
And, I finally got to a place where I remember at first I was terrified of like credit card companies, like somebody was going to come get me. And finally I realized that this is a company. They could really care less about me. All they want is my money. Why am I giving all this power to something that I don't really need to be afraid of? So you can certainly use it like if you're worried about your creditors. It's another good place to use the prayer.
So many people get terrorized about money. Even if they have lots of money, they start worrying, what if I lose my money? And if they don't have much money, well, where's the money going to come from? And that energy, as you say, creates more scarcity thinking. So that's a great way to use it.
Right.
And so
I hope people will try it because it's so magical and it's so easy. And I have to do this prayer on people who I give it to who are really in a bad place and they won't use it.
Yeah, that happens, right? Somebody you feel upset with you, but you could do that prayer just thinking about them. And I don't know if this has happened to you, but obviously it did with your ex-husband Keith. But I notice all of a sudden they'll call me the next day and they go, I don't know why I was feeling so upset. I feel much better now.
Yeah.
So I just wanted people to know how to, obviously there's the link, which we'll put here so you can see it near this recording, to get the prayer for yourself. So you just give your email address and then it gets sent to you via email, or you can download it right from the page. And just also, womenhealingtheworld.com is the website. There's a Facebook group you can join as well. There's a local meetup in Texas, and there's going to be more chapters starting. So anything else that you want people to know about Women Healing the World and what you do and what your vision, things coming up?
We would love for people to join us. We're a group of women who look for problems and ways to solve them.
Right.
And, everybody has different ideas, but we're picking one project at a time. And right now our focus is going to be on some sort of microfinance, some way to help people who are struggling with money not get further into debt.
Good. And so let's just deal with some questions that came in and see, you might relate to some of these questions, and you can ask a question as well if it comes up. A common question is, what if the person I need to forgive has already passed away?
Well, it doesn't matter. You can still do it, whether they're physically here or in spirit, because it's going to change you.
Right.
I don't know what it does for people on the other side. It might also help them. I don't know. I'm still curious about that, but I know it will help you have peace.
Yeah, and so many people lose people out of their life without having done any kind of forgiveness and then regret.
Right.
I know I did that. I was fighting with my mother when she died, and I didn't know she was going to die when she did. And so when I did that forgiveness prayer with her, it was huge, because it took 10 years before I did it. And I wish I'd done it earlier.
A lot sooner, yeah. Yeah, and you can just envision them sitting there with you as you read this. It's the same process, but again, I think it'll be magical.
Great. And here's another question. What if I do the prayer and I don't feel anything different?
I will admit that when I first read it, I didn't feel anything, but I just kept doing it. Like I said, because I trusted Pat. And I didn't really feel like I had made a big shift until I observed my behavior. So it wasn't like an awareness while I was in the process, but as time went on, and how I realized that I felt, and how I realized that I was acting so much different than I had been before.
Right. So it can be gradual. So the thing to do is notice, oh, I'm reacting less. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not in my stomach as much.
Yeah.
Okay.
That didn't push my buttons. Somebody said something and I let it go.
Yeah. So those are really good things to notice, that it's working.
It's very subtle.
Yeah.
Very subtle.
Yeah.
At least it was for me. It might be different for somebody else.
Yeah. I've done it where it's been both ways. I felt this huge release, and other times it's, as you say, subtler. And here's another question. What are you really saying when you repeat this prayer? For example, what if you don't want to ask for forgiveness or feel loving?
Well, again, I think it's fake it till you make it. And you don't have to feel loving, and you don't have to want to forgive. But you need to have the awareness that if you don't forgive, it's not having an impact on the other person, it's hurting you. Right. And they have found that, we make ourselves ill by all the negative things that we carry around with us. So it's self-inflicted.
And I've seen people who've done a forgiveness process like this look like 10 years younger after they did it.
Yeah.
It allows the vital life force energy back into your cells.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I will say, like when we did it as a class, when we would do it as a class, there was a tremendous, it's like people talk about coming together for prayer, power of the group. So when the whole group was doing this together, they were doing their individual forgiveness, but we're doing the process as a group. There would be big releases sometimes for people. And yes, definitely people looked more alive, more alert.
Yeah, and that's something you can do, is get together with a group and do it and support each other to do it. And I know you've done that, and I've done that, and just watching someone else go through a forgiveness process is as powerful sometimes as you doing it yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, anything else you want to add as a final thought?
Give it a try. It's really easy, and it is profoundly life-changing. At least it was for me.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot of time. Doesn't cost anything.
No, you don't have to go to a therapist. You don't have to relive all the bad stuff. You just say the prayer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking on this subject. It's one of my favorite subjects, and I know it's very important for people to hear, especially hear your story. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate being able to share my story.
All right. Okay. Until next time, everyone, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Carla. Bye.